Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This time I'm watching Why Are There No Bridges in East London by Mapman. I watched a video about what happened to Old London Bridge and it was kind of explained there why there are none in East London, but it wasn't exactly in detail. While this video is 13 minutes long and it's going to go into full detail about exactly why there's none in East London. So let's check it out.
In West London, you're spoilt for choice for ways to cross the River Thames.
But in East London, the Thames is your wet nemesis. Your only options to cross are queue for ages for the Blackwall Tunnel, go the huge long way round and pay the toll for the Dartford crossing, or get seasick on the so slow it's literally never worth it Woolwich Ferry. This gives poor East London quite the disadvantage.
Despite the very short distance
Would taking a ferry
flies,
even
if you
be
live
worth
here,
it?
it's very unlikely you go to work or school or do your shopping or visit friends here, unless you're a crow.
Greater London effectively operates like a Pac-Man with a wacka-wacka wide gap between these isolated communities.
So how did London end up so unfairly asymmetrical? In other words...
So in London, if you're on one side of the river, you probably don't do anything on the other side of the river, so there's no reason for you to really ever go there.
Why is
At
West
least
London
in
better
East
than
London.
East London? Dun, 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 dun. Basically, there are three reasons why it's easier to build bridges in West London than East London.
1. Geography. In the west, the River Thames is a narrow, squiggly trickle where bridge building is
Oh, it
easy.
must be wider
But
in
by the
West
time
London.
it gets to London Bridge,
East
it
London.
becomes a wide, majestic estuary with massive tides and marshy floodplains. Lest we forget, the Romans built London Bridge where they did, specifically because it was the widest place they could build it.
So it's just because
2.
it's wider.
Shipping. In the late 19th century, when London did most of its growing, it was the biggest shipping port in the world, making bridge building east of the ports practically impossible.
The literally only bridge in East-ish London, Tower Bridge, was an incredible feat of construction. So impressive it merited its own episode. Its elaborate brute force engineering and massive cost were justified by its iconic location. A huge
I'll have to watch
gateway
that
to the
video
heart
as
of
well.
London for those arriving by boat.
If they wanted to build any more bridges in East London, every one of them would have to be bigger or more complicated than Tower Bridge. And that wasn't going to happen because...
Really?
3. No demand.
Oh, yeah, of course,
Historically,
because
East
the
London has
river's
always
wider.
been poorer and more sparsely populated than West London, with no rich people to pay tolls and no important people to complain. So not only was it more...
So there's no one to pay for it and no one who
wasn't worth
actually wants it.
However, to complain. So not only was it more effort to build
Crossings
here, it wasn't worth the effort. However, that all started to change at the end of the 19th century.
In the decades since the disastrous Thames Tunnel, the Victorians had learnt some lessons and had become rather good at digging.
Having figured out how to build miles of railways underground, all they had to do was exactly the same thing under the river.
So at the end of the 19th century, using the same technology as the tube, London got its very first road tunnels.
That's
One
going
at
to take a
Blackwall
lot more
and one
effort
at
than a
Rotherhithe.
bridge, though.
With demand
First road tunnels, one at Blackwall and one at Rotherhithe.
Fun fact, both tunnels were built in the shape of S-bend to prevent horses from bolting when they saw daylight. True fact. No, they weren't. That's a myth. Oh, they're S-shaped because the approach roads don't perfectly line up with the straight bit under the river.
With demand still rising and East London's population still growing, these should have been the start of a tunnel revolution
Is he
spreading
coughing so
eastwards
much?
along the Thames throughout the throughout the 20th century.
Is it because of the fumes from the cars?
So why didn't that happen? It's a story that's been told so many times I'm getting bored of it now. Basically, the war.
First the First World War and second the Second World War put a stop to all big public projects. And when the wars were over, the money
Of
had
course,
run
yeah.
out. And it never
Money
really
has to
came
go
back.
to the military.
And so the 20th century saw pretty much no new river crossings in London.
Apart from the Greenwich and Woolwich foot tunnels, which don't really count because they're just foot tunnels. Chiswick and Twickenham bridges, both part of the same road, opened on the same day in 1933. A second Blackwall tunnel, which doesn't really count because it's just a widening of the first. And the Dartford tunnel, which
So
became
what's the
two
point?
Dartford tunnels, which became two Dartford tunnels, and the QE2 bridge, which also doesn't really count because it's in not London. London found itself frozen in this asymmetrical
beyond
state
London.
for more than a century.
This asymmetry gives the river a completely different character depending which side of London you're on.
In the west, the river brings prosperity and flats with views and gastropubs and university boat races. But in the east, the river brings...
Yeah, that doesn't look very nice.
By the end of the 20th century,
Not very
the shipping
appealing.
industry that prevented any crossings being built here in the first place had all but disappeared, leaving behind a string of post-industrial literal dead ends, largely untouched by regeneration or your thoughts.
The exception that proves
Is this
the rule
what
is
London
Canary-
actually looks like
largely
on
untouched by
the east?
regeneration or your thoughts.
The exception
Looks
that proves the
horrible.
rule is Canary Wharf, which since the 80s has seen a rebirth as a business district full of
Has no one ever thought to try to do
Full
anything?
The
What?
80s has seen a rebirth as a business district full of
Has no one ever thought to try to do anything to fix this? Yes, they have, ages ago.
In the 1970s, plans were afoot for a long-awaited pill to close Pac-Man's mouth, the boringly named the East London River Crossing.
By this time, technology had moved on, and bridges had once again overtaken tunnels as the more cost-effective way to get cars across a river.
The bridge formed part of the notorious plans for new motorways in London called ringways.
On the north side, the roads were more
Plans for new motorways in London called ringways.
Another video I'll have to watch.
Were more than ready for the arrival of the new bridge.
You can clearly see on satellite view how the North Circular Road gapes expectantly open wide, ready to send and receive cross-river traffic. But on the south side, it's not clear at all where the traffic
Well,
is
it
meant
never
to
happened,
go.
huh?
The new bridge would have necessitated the construction of a huge 8-lane motorway, bulldozing hundreds of households out of the way.
The people of Plumstead were understandably
That's not
unhappy
worth it.
when the bridge got approval in 1985, but their bacon was rescued by an unlikely saviour.
2 years later, in 1987, the government accidentally built an international airport right next door to the site of the new bridge, which added a maximum height restriction
accidentally.
on top of the already restrictive minimum height restriction.
With the bridge needing a complete redesign, that meant going through the approval process all over again. And this time, it failed.
And it didn't get
all
approved.
thoughts of a crossing here were abandoned in 1993. But not for long.
In 2004, the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, proposed an upgrade, or downgrade depending how you look at it, on the same site. The slightly betterly named Thames Gateway Bridge.
Ken's Bridge was going to be a local bridge for local people.
There would be just 4 lanes instead of 8, 2 of which would be bus lanes, which had the potential of being turned into an extension for the DLR.
You can see on satellite view that Ken's Bridge got quite far in the planning stages too.
Just north of Galleon's Reach, there's a wide concrete flyover that stops mid-air where the connection to his new bridge was going to be.
Environmentally
So that's
speaking,
just
it was a massive
there,
improvement
waiting
on
for the
monster
bridge.
in the 70s. But there was a major flaw in Ken's concept.
A local bridge for local people was a very naive and completely impossible thing to enforce.
I'm thinking this one, go away!
Ken's Bridge could only have been local if it were one of many crossings in East London, so that travellers had lots of options, just like how it is in West London.
Well,
But
it
with East
wouldn't be.
London
It would
so
be the
far
only
behind,
option.
The Thames Gateway Bridge on its own would unavoidably have drawn cars and lorries from all over London, congesting and polluting the narrow residential streets of Plumstead, which in many ways is worse than building a motorway through it.
The Thames Gateway Bridge was indeed designed to be joined later by the Belvedere Bridge and Silvertown Tunnel, but the locals knew that these complementary crossings wouldn't realistically have come to the rescue for decades, if they ever came at all.
For that reason, the Thames Gateway Bridge was viewed as a cause of congestion, and for that reason it had almost no support politically or locally. And for that reason, when the next Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, came along, he took the popular and simple decision to scrap it. It was a rather
Just
odd
destroy
move
it.
for Boris, a man so famously fond of bridges. Perhaps he just didn't like it because it wasn't his idea.
It's harder than ever to get big projects like bridges funded by the government and or approved by the locals. That's why all the bridges built this century have
Really?
been quite a pedestrian affair. So far we've had the Millennium Bridge, which when first opened struggled to take the weight of pedestrians, and the Emirates Airline, an expensive overbrand bridge which when
It
first opened
struggled-
struggled to take the
It struggled to take the weight of just pedestrians, just regular people. Within minutes, the bridge was swaying under the sheer weight of thousands of sightseers. Just after 3 days, it was closed.
weight
Holy
of
crap.
pedestrians.
I mean, that doesn't look
and the
very
Emirates
stable.
Airline, an expensive overbranded cable car / tourist non-attraction connecting nowhere to nowhere else, inexplicably featured on the tube map despite a grand total of regular users of 4.
A few more pedestrian-only
Really?
Featured on the tube map despite a
Only
grand
4
total of
users.
regular users of 4.
A few more pedestrian-only bridges have also been planned and not built.
At Canary Wharf, Wandsworth, Pimlico, and most high profile of
So been
What
planned
was
and not
that?
built.
at Canary Wharf, Wandsworth, Pimlico,
I'm sorry, but what is this supposed to be? Oh wait, this is a pedestrian bridge. This isn't for cars. Never mind. It's a... Okay. That's acceptable then.
and most high profile of all, the profoundly unnecessary Garden Bridge, intended more for private parties and selfies than for travel, which cost £53 million just to cancel.
But these are tourist attractions at best and vanity projects
God,
at worst.
imagine spending-
And they're all in central.
Cancel.
But these are tourist attractions at
They
best
spent
and
53
vanity
million
projects at
pounds
worst.
for something
And they're
like
all in
that?
central London.
And cancelled
they
it
do nothing
anyway?
to address the fundamental Pac-manity of Greater London and are quite insulting to East Londoners. So now, 15 years after the Thames Gateway Bridge was cancelled, what's been put on the table to address this? The worst crossing ever proposed.
Right next door to the Blackwall Tunnel, but at a jaunty
It just
angle,
keeps getting
is the very
worse?
controversially proposed Silvertown Tunnel.
It's a very odd choice of location, given that it's one of the few parts of East London that already has lots of river crossings, and it's an even odder choice of mode. The Silvertown Tunnel is for motor traffic only, with no pedestrians, cyclists or trains allowed. Its purpose
Oh.
is to reduce traffic in the Blackwall Tunnel, which we really should have learnt by now, in real life will encourage more car journeys than before and create more congestion in the whole Blackwall area.
Public opinion is more anti-car than ever, which is why there's a massive campaign against the Silvertown Tunnel. And as for whether it'll ever be built, I don't know.
I mean, to be fair, these are climate protesters, and let's be honest, climate protesters are pretty fucking stupid, especially here in the West.
Silvertown Tunnel. And as for whether it'll ever be built, I don't know.
It's a paradox. East London desperately needs connections, but East London desperately also needs not to be ruined by pollution and congestion. So what on earth could be the solution? There's actually a rather brilliant one.
The two as yet unconnected East Londons are a great opportunity to create ambitious new non-car crossings for rail, trams, cycling and walking.
Ignoring today's demand for new roads and instead providing for journeys that don't exist yet may seem daft and will certainly cause frustration for the first few years, but when the only option to cross is a clean, green, sustainable one, people will take the clean, green, sustainable one in their thousands, and the positive effect will spread well beyond the banks of this river. For proof of how brilliantly this phenomenon works, come with me now to West London.
In 2019, nasty cracks were found in the pedestals of Hammersmith Bridge, and the local council abruptly closed it to all traffic after 132 years of service.
Understandably, many local drivers complained, saying it would cause traffic jams, and it did at first, but then an interesting thing
Of course it would.
When Hammersmith Bridge reopened in 2021, it assumed a new role as a quiet, pleasant and safe pedestrian and cycle bridge, which has encouraged more journeys by foot and by bike, reducing car journeys and traffic not just in Hammersmith but across West London.
What Hammersmith shows us is that what we choose to build, or indeed choose to don't build, affects how we choose or don't choose to travel. And that's the way round it should be. The tide is shifting, pun massively intended, in the right direction, away from cars.
The proposed Lower Thames Crossing, a scheme to fight cars with cars to try to take traffic out of the Dartford Tunnel, has been roundly rejected by locals.
There's actually been rather a lot of progress for trains lately.
No fewer than 7 new rail crossings have appeared across the Thames in the last 25 years, and there are even more proposed for the future. There's a potential rail link to Thamesmead from the DLR or overground, but probably not both. There's the Kennex Tram, a planned tram network around the riverside commuter towns in Kent and Essex linked by a tunnel, which is too far outside London to be taken seriously. And of course the Elizabeth line is going to open, tomorrow. Well, it took 3 videos, but that's pretty much the whole history of the River Thames and how Londoners have crossed it from the Romans to the present day.
I find it fascinating how much
I highly doubt there will be much of a change with how many people suddenly choose to go by foot,
started out as a major highway and the lifeblood
on
of
foot
London,
or by
saturated
bike
with boats
instead
of
of
all different
cars.
shapes and sizes, now spends most of its time sitting uselessly empty. A physical and mental barrier between North and South London. But will this trend, like so many others in London's evolving infrastructure, shift back the other way? Are there ways we could put our river to better use?
The Thames Clippers are starting to transform from an expensive novelty tourist attraction into a reliable commuter service. Maybe they have a future as a no-nonsense integrated part of the city's attraction into a reliable commuter service. Maybe they have a future as a no-nonsense integrated part of the city's transport network, like how it is in Sydney, or Brisbane, or Copenhagen, or San Francisco, or Zurich, or Hong Kong, or Amsterdam. Or maybe they'll go completely the other way and drain the River Thames and turn it into a park. It's not that far-fetched an idea. It's exactly what they did to the River Turia in Valencia in 1969, making the city safer from flooding and opening up acres of new green space.
What future
Is that really a good idea, though?
in the next 1,000 years?
Just getting rid of your
once
river?
again becoming a major useful highway. The answer is coming in part
That could have a lot of bad consequences, so it's not necessarily the best idea. When it comes to draining the river, personally, I feel like that would be a bad idea, but then again, what do I know? As for the climate change, stop protesting in places where people are already trying to go green, and start protesting in places where people don't give a damn about going green. Like China. And again, there's no point for me to really say much. It's climate protesters. Below room temperature IQ is pretty average for them. So there's not much more for me to say. So I will leave that topic alone. Not going to say anything more on it. So hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.